Well, I thought this might be a little different. This is kind of Andy Warholish theme. You know, he did this for Marilyn Monroe, and I believe the Rolling Stones copied this very same motif for one of their albums. Back with the vino. Well, I have nothing particular to talk about except that I have been away from YouTube and for a while because a lot of stuff has gone on. I got my Asperger Syndrome diagnosis back about January, late January, early February. Immediately followed by a diagnosis of type 2 diabetes. And that was not fun to hear that, not in the least. That really freaked the crap out of me. And then February 22nd, my son was born, and this was not without complication. My wife almost died. And I'm serious, I'm not kidding about that. She almost died. So needless to say, for about 4 or 5 days there, I was really in an emotional hell. Now, keep in mind, here's an Aspie who just got his diagnosis, who is really freaked out by the threat, if you will, of type 2 diabetes. And I scored really low, by the way. My blood count was only 6.3, so it's borderline. Not that big a deal, but it's a life changer. And then, of course, this pregnancy damn near kills my wife. So, yeah. Needless to say, she is back. I mean, we got through it. The complication was her blood pressure. It was incredibly high. I mean, the doctors really don't know how she's still walking, honestly, how she's still on this earth. Because by all accounts, she should have had a heart attack and not survived it. But it's just one of those things that I guess happens with pregnancy. And given that this is our 4th child and her 4th C-section, we can't have any more. So this is our final kid. And it left us terribly heartbroken to get her tubes tied because we wanted at least 6. But my wife and I were getting on in years. We are in our 40s. And so we're, technically speaking, really reaching the end of the childbearing years anyhow. And it breaks my heart that we can't get one more in. Anywho, imagine, yeah, you know what, you fellow Aspies out there like Count Zuref and the rest of you guys, you don't have to imagine. You are Aspies. So think of this, of the worst possible scenario in your life and magnify it by about, well, I'll be generous here, by about maybe 3 or 4, maybe 5. I was so severely going out of my mind with this chaos and this craziness. And I got really stupid drunk one night, you know, just to deal with the pain. And that's not something I suggest anyone do because I wound up burning my hand that night. The scar is still there, and it's probably going to stay there. Yeah, you can't really see it. Okay, so what is the point of this? I guess the point of this is, how does an Aspie deal with stress of a great magnitude? Well, the only thing I can say is that I've had to revert, if you will, back to normality. Back to before I got the diagnosis of type 2 diabetes, before my wife's extremely complicated, harrowing, almost life-ending pregnancy, and the birth of my son. Yeah, because, if you don't go back to where you started in a time of crisis, I think you lose sight of where you're going. I just feel safer. I feel much safer going back to square one and replotting my course from there. Now, as Aspies know, as everyone who has Asperger Syndrome knows, it's not easy for an Aspie to do that because we tend to be kind of scatterbrained at times when it comes to, or at least I tend to be a little scatterbrained when it comes to direction in my life. But what I do know is I love history and I love philosophy, and so I've let that be my guide. And what I love most about philosophy are St. Thomas Aquinas and Aristotle, and I'm really into Socrates too. But in this case, Aristotle was really the big help to me because his philosophy was that don't engage yourself in things which you will not benefit from. And I don't benefit in the least from needless worry, needless concern. But what will benefit me is if I return to square one and actively replot my course. And this begins with the little things like, well, for me it began with music. Now, as a Catholic, I like to keep a good, strong relationship with our Lord and Our Lady. One of the things that has helped me to do this is listening to contemporary Christian music again. In particular, Switchfoot, Toby Mac, some old school DC Talk, Audio Adrenaline, Newsboys. Because this brings me to a place of comfort. And the reason it brings me to a place of comfort is because it brings me to a place of certainty. And certainty is something that from my perspective, is of great necessity to Asperger Syndrome, or living with Asperger Syndrome. Anyways, this ends part one because you know what? YouTube has a timetable or something on these, and I gotta stop this and download it to YouTube. So I'll begin part two in a moment.